Namaste and greetings. I, Paridhi Jain, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav or Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered here today for the IMPRI's seventh annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of the Union Budget for the financial year 2026-27. As part of this series, we will be engaging in a panel discussion. Um, just a sec. We will be engaging in a panel discussion on defense, foreign policy, and Union Budget 2026-27. This discussion is organized by the IMPRI Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies under the IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I warmly welcome all of you to this insightful deliberation and thank you for turning in. The chair and moderator is Dr. Simi Mehta ji, CEO and Editorial Director, IMPRI. Today's expert panelists include Major General Dr. P. K. Chakravorty ji, VSM retired, strategic thinker on security issue, visiting senior fellow IMPRI. Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya ji, retired professor, international relations, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, visiting professor IMPRI. Professor Prabir ji, professor, research and information systems for developing countries, New Delhi. Professor Annapurna Nautiyal ji, Vice Chancellor Hemvati Nandan, Bahuguna Garhwal University, Uttarakhand. Professor Swaran Singh ji, former professor and chairperson, Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. The conveners of the program are Dr. Simi Mehta ji and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. Before we begin today's session, we have a short PPT presentation on the budget. I would like to share my screen and present it.
Yeah, I also just want to correct you that I am not the Vice Chancellor now. I have retired. So I had requested Simi to kindly make that change. Now I am a former Vice Chancellor.
Apologies.
Hello, Sanjukta ji.
Annapurna ji, let me also take opportunity to say that I am not the former. I am still.
Yes. I was just about to intervene on this. It was just
I am former.
They swapped former for you and me.
Yes, sir. Apologies. Please proceed, Paridhi.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for the inconvenience caused. Second. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, good evening, everyone. So, I'll take the next 5 minutes to walk you through the defense and foreign policy snapshot of the budget. So, let me begin with defense. So, as you can see in the highlight slide, the Ministry of Defense has been allocated rupees 7.85 lakh crore, the highest ever, marking a 15.19% increase over last year. Defense now accounts for 14.67% of total central government expenditure, firmly anchoring national priorities. So, but what matters more than size is how this money is being spent. So, if we look at the capital allocation, capital outlay rises to rupees 2.19 lakh crore, which is a 21.84% increase, pushing the capital share to a record 28% of the defense budget. This is a structure shift. Modernization is finally growing faster than routine expenditure. So this capital push supports advanced aircraft procurement, including LCA, MK2, and multi-role platforms, naval fleet modernization, particularly submarines and warships, strategic infrastructure. For example, BRO has been allocated rupees 12,000 crore for LSE-focused border roads. Furthermore, rupees 975 crore for optical fiber-based defense networks for strengthening secure communication. Another clear theme here is indigenization. 75% of capital acquisition, rupees 1.39 lakh crore, is reserved for domestic industry, supported by custom duty exemptions for MRO-related raw materials. This aligned with the 75% indigenization target by 2030. On the technology side, DRDO funding rises to rupees 29,100 crore, taking defense R&D to about 3.7% of the total defense budget. Now, moving forward to the foreign policy allocation. The MEA receives rupees 22,118 crore, a 12% increase over last year. On neighborhood aid, the allocation is rupees 4,548 crore, but it is highly concentrated. So, Bhutan alone receives rupees 2,288 crore, nearly half the total, mainly for hydropower and infrastructure. Nepal receives rupees 800 crore, Sri Lanka rupees 400 crore, and aid to Bangladesh is sharply reduced to rupees 60 crore, signaling calibrated and conditional engagement. Now, here you can have a look at the budget allocation for revenue and capital disbursement. Moving ahead, now I would like you to refer to this committed expenditure table. So, for defense, around 61% of the budget is pre committed. Pension stand at rupees 1.71 lakh crore, pay and allowances rupees 3.58 lakh crore, operations and maintenance for rupees 1.58 lakh crore. This explains why, despite a 15% headline increase, effective fiscal flexibility is much lower. Now, a similar rigidity is visible in the Ministry of External Affairs. So, if you look at the MEA side of the table, rupees 3,200 crore, about 86% of the MEA budget is logged into embassy and mission operations. This leaves only 14% of the allocation available for new diplomatic initiatives. So, both defense and foreign policy face the same structural issue, high fixed costs limiting strategic maneuverability. Now, let me draw your attention to upcoming initiatives. On the defense side, the expansion strategy rests on three pillars. First, technology and indigenization, which is led by the IDEX scheme and defense startups. Platform modernization, including aircraft and naval fleet upgrades. Strategic infrastructure with border roads, tunnels, and forward air bases, especially along the LSE. Coming to foreign policy and its upcoming initiatives. Vaccine Maitri 2.0 with rupees 1,200 crore reinforcing India's global South health diplomacy. Grassroots Development Partnership funded at rupees 5,685 crore covering rural electrification and community projects. The broader overseas development partnership portfolio of rupees 6,997 crore supporting economic diplomacy through connectivity, power grids, and digital infrastructure. You'll also notice some notable absences on this slide. Zero allocation for Chabhar Port, no fresh funding for Indo-Pacific or Quad-linked military cooperation. These gaps indicate strategic caution rather than expansion. Now, finally, let me briefly summarize the analytical trends. Defense capital expenditure reaches a record of 28%, revenue still dominates at 72%, while pensions consume 31% of the revenue. Moreover, 15% headline defense growth drops to 9% after accounting for 61% committed liabilities. Furthermore, MEA operations only log 86% of budget. Neighborhood aid concentration is also very highly strategic. So, in essence, this budget reflects strategic realism. It pushes modernization and indigenization in defense while accepting fiscal constraints. In foreign policy, it prioritizes selective partnership and development diplomacy rather than broad expansion. So, basically, the emphasis is on consolidation, not overreach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paridhi. Thank you for walking us through the broad contours of the budget and its implications on defense, foreign policy, and foreign policy. So, with this, let me formally welcome our distinguished panelists as well as all the attendees and those watching us live on our social media platforms. So, good afternoon once again. This year's budget has been presented actually at a moment when India's strategic environment is marked by uncertainty from prolonged conflicts in Europe and West Asia, and also to the persistent tensions in the Indo-Pacific and the growing fragmentation of the global trade and technology regimes. So against this background, this year's budget is not merely an economic document, and it is actually a strategic document about how India sees its role in the world. Paridhi has already walked us through the defense allocations and various budgetary allocations, where it is at an all-time high, especially in the defense sector. But what is particularly significant here is where is the money going? And compared to last year, the capital expenditure for defense in terms of modernization, procurement, and also indigenous production, this year also it has seen a much steeper increase than the revenue expenditure. And it is definitely poised to have a lot of capability creation. And at a time when the government has maintained its fiscal consolidation part, bringing the fiscal deficit further down as compared to the last year, it signals a careful balancing act, which means that there is spending on more of security and strategic assets without losing the macroeconomic credibility internationally. And this itself is a form of economic diplomacy. So, beyond the defense, the budget reinforces on infrastructure, on logistics, technology, innovation, manufacturing, and exports. So, with the taken together, as far as I see, the budget reflects a broader strategic vision, positioning India as a credible security provider, a trusted economic partner, and a rule shaper rather than a rule taker in this changing global order. So, today's discussion, therefore, is not just about numbers, it is about the budgetary choices, how they translate into the strategic outcomes for India's defense preparedness, as well as its foreign policy priorities and global partnerships. So, I'm delighted to explore these questions with our distinguished panel. I'd like to begin with the round one with these remarks. And beginning with Professor Prabir De, I'd request all the panelists to have their opening remarks regarding how this budget, how do you see this budget as in terms of India's evolving strategic priorities? And is this a response to the immediate threats or a longer term strategic recalibration? So with this, I would request Professor Prabir De to start his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Simi, Dr. Simi, and Dr. Simi Mehta, and other distinguished panelists, particularly Professor Saran Singh, Professor Bhattacharya, and Professor Nautiyal, and General Chakravorty ji. So it's a pleasure coming back to IMPRI budget roundtable. Now, most of it, what I'm going to talk is already discussed nicely by the first Simi and then the first presenter. I have some points, in the context of what Dr. Simi said. We look at the budget and not just a knee-jerk reaction, but for connecting it with in a long-term perspective. Now, if you recall the earlier time, 20 years back, the budget used to be with a briefcase, and followed the previously, it used to be like that, and there was a railway budget itself. Those budgets, and if you compare 20 years later, what is happening, this time, for the last few years, I found the budgets is linked with a vision. The vision is, we know the Viksit Bharat, India is going to be developed country by 2047, and each and every budget says, that's why this is calibrated to attain that objective. If you compare the last year budget and this year budget, I found lots of similarities.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Would you like to share your
Yeah.
presentation?
Yeah. I just short presentation.
Yes.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
we can see
visible
now.
Is it visible? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So so what I'm going to argue, that we look at the budget. There are, Indian economy is not just, in the, it says, it's a closed economy. It's an open economy. So anything happening globally, we need to be concerned. 30 years back, this was not the case, So today, any budget, if you have seen the finance minister's speeches, many of the things are actually linked with the global issues, the global, and currently that's a fragmented global order. So if we start with this slide, that World Economic Forum, World Economic Outlook of the IMF, it indicates that many of the larger economies, like the China particularly, slowing down, and India fastest growth, And till 2030, the data is actually available. We don't need to forecast. It is done by the IMF. So much, more reliable in a way, the IMF data. But these kind of optimism, India is becoming the fastest growing economy. We have to be a bit careful reading the number. Why? Because presently, the global disorder, there are lots of downsides, headwinds, and I pick up in 4 points which finance ministers, honorable finance ministers, attempted to address, particularly its trade, protectionisms and its downsides, trade protectionism and the downsides associated with the trade. Second is the inflationary pressure. At the moment, since last year Diwali until now, inflationary pressure is not there much. So gap between the growth rate, nominal, and the real is very low. And so that means everybody is very happy. Lots of consumption is happening, but there are other issues. As soon as you stopped supplying required inputs for productions, required input for critical areas, then inflation pressure will start flowing. So that point was also addressed, attempted, at least I can tell you, in terms of semiconductor, in terms of critical minerals, economic security. Then there are globally reforms have been stalled. WTO is not working. Americans are telling there is no point of a World Trade Organization. It's not working for the multilateral trade. Rather, it is helping the regional trade. Since there are many narratives floating around, and the supply chain disruptions. All four of them are, nicely. At least there is an attempt in the budget. And let me come to thereafter. How, very quickly in 1 to 2 minutes time. And then I conclude that what is the sentiment and what is the key takeaway. Sentiment is, as the word presented by, that this is made to looking for an aspiration of the Viksit Bharat, but in term, looking at the global challenges. This is one. Second is that the reforms that started for last few budgets, and there is a continuation. This time, some of the reforms, even the very new to us, like the agriculture, digital stack, it has, like the Bharat Vistar, it has a huge impact on the agriculture. It's going to be huge impact on the agriculture and rural sector. And this is incremental. That's I underscore. Second, people friendly, because income tax slab has remained same, no changes. And on top, there has been an attempt to simplify the procedures, tax submission procedures. There is also, attempt to strengthen the growth and development aspects, sustaining growth, foundation like infrastructure, capital expenditure, rising capital expenditures, and there is a crowding in of private sector investments going to happen. Then the governance aspect, ease of doing business, fiscal matters, etc., etc. There are multiple driving pillars for agriculture. First time I see that the productivity enhancement mechanisms, schemes have been introduced in manufacturing sector, semiconductor mission 2.0. For SMEs, 10,000 crore SME fund. For services sector, tax holidays till 2047, those who are investing in the cloud infrastructure, cloud services. As you know that India is becoming the world destination for data centers, etc., etc. So this is certainly going to strengthen our, services sector, services exports, etc. Infrastructure, I discussed connectivity. And so overall, the sentiment is very positive. That's what I read the line. But look at, there are other issues which are not addressed but probably there was no further scope. We don't expect budget to provide many things. It is not a kind of panacea for every kind of miseries. So, like global uncertainties and downsides will continue to happen. Today, it is 18% duty and negotiated FTA with the US, EU. But all these things may not produce, as it's going by the trend, rising in Indian exports and narrowing the debt deficits. So global uncertainty is downside. This is, is continue. Energy security will be hugely, required. There is an attempt at clean energy in the budget, but I think this required perhaps more attention and divided climate agenda. So from the climate point of view and looking at the newer challenges in the trade, I think that this budget could have provided much more. But anyway, this is my own reading it's purely my simple, my own views. Let's come one by one, since the time is limited, as the previous presentation discussed, that we are talking about very big ideas. India's, attempt to become, third largest economy by 2047, but our allotment to the MEA, MEA's allotment even less than 0.5% of the total budget allotment. I can't believe it, that MEA's allotment is 0.41%, and it is even reducing, from 2023-24. I'm very surprised, Actually, it should grow more, if you have so much kind of a commitment, so much kind of, so many, agenda in mind. So budget should be more. So this is, I think, mixed outcome. Second point is that allotment to the neighboring countries is marginally increased, but we need to be careful. But budget estimate, a revised estimate, something we need to be very careful. Like 2025-26, allotment to the Bangladesh was 120, but it went 38 because of the Bangladesh internal issues. So I see the numbers in the neighborhood, it is good, the number has increased, but utilization is also an issue. Are those countries that capable to utilize the money that we have given? That's why even if we can't utilize the Myanmar or Maldives or some other countries in that way, but it gets reduced with the next budget. The good point is that Sri Lanka has successfully utilized the 300 crore. That's why they got the 400 crore this year. Chabahar Port, as presentation said, there's no need because of US sanction and other sensitivities. This budget also indicates that for the first time, Latin American countries, their allotment has got doubled. You have to read that India's strategic interest in Africa and Latin America because of the diversification of the markets. So that's what I see. This is kind of some directions is coming. Point number 3 for the exports and the doing business. First time I see there are good some catalytic changes is going to happen because we are looking for 2 trillion by 2030 on the manufacturing sector. Some directions has been given. SME sector 10,000 crore front, infrastructure, logistics, services, export expansion like cloud storage capacity, audiovisual, gaming. It's a health sector, and the continuation of the reform, in particular the customs and export promotion missions. So I see these are continuation of what we see in the last year. Point number 4 is our economy in terms of foreign policy is getting integrated in the new areas like clean energy, EV, semiconductor, aviation, electronics, and healthcare. So far that this budget is concerned, yes, we see, because the removal of the basic custom duty, that leads to higher import of parts and components, and more higher imports of parts and components means higher exports and higher production link. So some way, this is very much continuation of what we had in the last year. Point number 5, this budget again did a very cleaning the customs procedures and reforms. I cannot go because of the time limitation. There are many small developments, small measures have been proposed on authorized economic operators' point of view, on integrated customs systems, on ease of living. Individually who are coming from abroad, earlier it was 20% duty if we are bringing a dutiable goods. Now it has been reduced to 10%. Most of our professionals working in the services sector or data centers or tourism industries, those who are coming from abroad, they will be feeling very happy about it. Plus basic custom duty has been reduced to drugs and pharmaceuticals. Point number 5, on the foreign policy point of view, there are 100% BCT exemptions, continuation of the last year. There is semiconductor mission 2.0. There is, the new project that started last year, October, the rare earth magnet project, 7,280 crore. It got a new, a new addition in this budget. So it's a continuation, by the way. The rare earth permanent magnet in India is very much important in terms of chips and semiconductor. Plus, this budget also tells you rare earth corridors in Odisha, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc., etc. And 24/7 data center, get a tax exemption. So strategic push for artificial intelligence, semiconductors, data center, and critical minerals. Last point, what we see that, very much the way China has been done, that India is following same way. And there is no harm comparing India and China here. That, China 15 years back started their journey for high speed. They have replaced their old railway line, into a high speed. India is going into the same direction. 2029 is the starting date of Ahmedabad to Mumbai high speed, going with the same direction. 7 high speed is proposed. This is going to change, the neighborhood integration, and as well as in the Indian, moving the mobility, real modernization, freight movement. So what we, to conclude, what we see from the budget, that there is a continuation. Last year, before Diwali, there was a GST reform. That GST reform, and this time, the reforms proposed in 2026 is a kind of, mass consumption will go up. Higher consumption means, there is a direct impact on the GDP, but we have to be careful, what kind of, consumptions we are talking about. Point number 2, by the way, this consumption is also leading, there are statistics coming in the, kind of an inequality across the country. Point number 2, in the several new initiatives to support Viksit Bharat, continuation of what we had in the last year budget. Point number 3 is that the neighborhood is not being ignored. Allotments is not there for the Chabahar port, but allotments are given to several other countries in the neighborhood in terms of, projects, support and capacity building. So we see lots of interest in the capital expenditure, infrastructure sector, logistics, economic security, GVCs, export capacity, economic security. So these are the very clean outcome, and there's a continuation. Point number 4, both in the previous budgets and this budget, there's a export expansion capacity. Both we have seen in the previous budget, so this year. And point number 5 is that, which is, kind of, my perception is that there is a global challenges is rising. But MEA share is the union budget continues to decline. That needs to be checked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Prabir De, for your wonderful analysis. And with the last point that you have mentioned about the MEA's share in the budget, I'd like to invite Professor Swaran Singh to discuss about this in his opening remarks.
Thank you. I think it's interesting, since you mentioned we are looking at this budget in terms of long-term message, if it has any. So in terms of strategic priorities, I think words that come to mind that must have guided this budget clearly talk about future readiness through technological autonomy, through modernization, through indigenization. That seems to be the guiding vision in terms of where this budget sees itself as a step towards taking India forward to Viksit Bharat, etc. But important when we look at allocations showcasing a certain percentage increase, important distinction need to be also made always between budget allocations and revised estimates. For example, the most talked about 15% increase in defense budget is in comparison to estimates. So actually the percentage could go even higher if you compare the original allocations of last year and this year. But it definitely showcases that post Operation Sindoor, defense has attracted enormous sort of priority in terms of how the budget is being looked at. By extension, it also means enormous focus on internal security. And therefore, MHA's budget has also showcased about 9.5% increase compared to last year. Within MHA, IB has received a maximum increase of 63%, primarily to focus on infrastructure building technology, so that its internal security infrastructure can be strengthened and modernized. Indeed, some sectors will showcase as much as 80% increase in terms of specific areas in infrastructure building within internal security infrastructure of MHA in that sense. When it comes to MEA, since Dr. Simi Mehta asked me to say something about the Ministry of External Affairs, I agree with Prabir. EAM or External Affairs Ministry has always received much smaller budgetary allocations, despite India wants to increasingly become a global player and is trying to stretch itself from Caribbean to Southwest Pacific, all major powers, middle powers, and global South. Another area which showcases why the budget stays low in the Ministry of External Affairs is the personnel. Despite I hear for about 20 years debate on the need to expand and enlarge our diplomatic corps, it still stays around less than 1,200 IFSA officers, 1,000 plus IFSB officers. Total strength you can stretch it to 66,000 maximum. So in that sense, if you're looking at India becoming globally engaged and the budget going up for Ministry of External Affairs, this I think is something that does not reflect that vision for future in that sense of making India a global player in that sense. So that is something that puzzles all of us, and Prabir did mention of the same thing. Even now, when we are talking of Ministry of External Affairs budget, much of its budget, actually 5,000 crore plus, is grant in aid, which is not actually to be used by Ministry of External Affairs. It is to be used by those countries that will be supported by India's credit lines, etc., etc. Even within Ministry of External Affairs, bulk of the increase showcases again in infrastructure building, consular services, missions. We are trying to open more missions, for example. So Ministry of External Affairs not only receives less than 0.5% of budget, it in that sense does not reflect that vision of India trying to showcase itself as a global player. So when we say that it's a future focused budget with talk about 12 plus lakh crore to be invested in general infrastructure building, rail, road, the ports, airports, electricity, and so on, and smart cities, it needs a bridge of Ministry of External Affairs to also facilitate India being recognized as a rapidly developing country. And other than Ministry of External Affairs, I think one, because I come from education sector, other than the physical infrastructure, which will make India, sort of developed nation, there is also need to focus enormously on what we call social infrastructure. And in that comes primarily what we are doing in terms of smart cities and skill development. And that brings us to Ministry of Education. Again, Ministry of Education has about 1.4 lakh crore budget. Bulk of it, it involves, this is not a budget for 6,000 MEA officials. It's a budget for very large number of institutions and people, more than I think 1 crore teachers, more than 25 crore students. So in that sense, when you talk of the kind of infrastructure that is involved in supporting that education, skill building, and when we talk about now every FTA, including workforce mobility agreements, we want to showcase that India wants to export its talent. Then we have to also prepare that talent which can be competitive at global standard. And in that sense, I think that limited budget, which I think is somewhere 2% of the total national central allocations, union government's budget, I think that again is some area that I think needs to have much more allocations than it has had. So compared to, for example, much larger budget in defense, which is well deserved, budget of soft power driven diplomacy, which is external affairs, and of course skill development driven soft power of India, education, are areas which perhaps should have required a greater allocations than we have had. We know that right from post-independence times, 3 committees have been set up to form education policy, and all of them have suggested up to 6% of GDP to be invested on education, and that I think still remains something to be desired in that sense. So when we talk of sort of budgetary allocations showcasing India moving forward towards future to achieve centennial goal of becoming a Viksit Bharat, in that sense, whether you're looking at soft power of India, skill development, cultural diplomacy, that are areas which apparently does not match up to the focus that I think budget shows in building physical infrastructure. For example, even in education, which is going to increase skill development and soft power, there is clear focus on creating university towns now. In that sense, there is a certain focus again on physical infrastructure. But social infrastructure, I think, is something that is required to become the focus area of the government. And in that sense, whether it is Ministry of Education or Ministry of External Affairs, environment could be another area, which again, I think will need much more focus than we have so far. I understand there is a focus on sort of fiscal consolidation that Simi mentioned, but we have just moved an inch compared to 4.4% fiscal deficit to 4.3% fiscal deficit. And I think also important to remember, when we have the rebasing of Indian GDP, from 2011 to 2022 now, I think some of these figures could reflect a very different picture as to what is the percentage of GDP that, defense budget, for example, now we are saying has crossed 2% of GDP with the current allocations. And of course, it will go up with revised allocations much later. And even within defense, for example, when we are looking at, sort of encouraging indigenization, and there's a list of more than 700 items to be produced locally, we still notice that allocations clearly outline specific budget allocations for much bigger platforms like fighter aircrafts, submarines, or sort of main battle tanks. Those are still something which domestically indigenization, BrahMos is a great example, but other than that, no major bigger platforms have been successfully sort of built domestically. And we can go on building auxiliary kind of equipment and ammunitions, but are we going to plan something in terms of larger platforms? And that again is something which budget doesn't as of now clearly showcase. But I think we all agree clearly the focus this time is on building physical infrastructure, enormous increase in and allocations in that direction. And even when we look at Ministry of Defense or Ministry of External Affairs, even within that, the capital outlay, I think capital expenditure is definitely that has received much greater focus this time. Maybe in the coming years, the budget will also equally balance and support and prioritize social infrastructure building as well, I think, in which case strengthening India's diplomacy, strengthening India's sort of education and skill development, etc., that could perhaps become focus in coming budgets, but that definitely is an area that needs to be addressed. Let me stop here. I had 5 minutes to make my initial remarks. If time permits, I will come back to talk about specifics. Thank you, and back to Simi.
Thank you so much for your initial opening remarks, which is in detail, you have detailed. You were specifically pointing out about investment and budget allocations in education sector. So this really gives me a wonderful segue to talk to Professor Annapurna Nautiyal. You have been at the helm of governing an institution, a university, as a former vice chancellor. Madam, I'd like to know your thoughts about, as Sir mentioned, budgets often focus on hard infrastructure and hardware, but strategic capacity also depends upon universities and research institutions. So how can higher education contribute more effectively towards defense innovation, strategic thinking, and policy capacity, along with your opening remarks on the budget, ma'am? Over to you.
Thank you, Simi. The debate is going into a different direction, but let me say a big thank you to you and to other co-panelists whom I am seeing after 1 year, I think. In 2025 budget we met, and then afterwards we are meeting now. So it's a very good occasion to gather all of us together. Yes, I am very sure about this this aspect, and I would also like to just convey that there is a different kind of focus. Education is part of that. Like the focus is on tourism also. So this tourism sector also belongs to education, because the aim of this sector is to prepare guides and that too not in 1 or 2, 3, 4, rather 10,000 trained guides. So university resources will also be used to train those guides, and according to the guides and their needs, the tourism trails are to be created. For this also the budget has been given certain allocation, and this also relates to one more discipline, that is archaeology. There are certain archaeological sites which have been given money for their excavation, exploration, and study, and also dating. So this is also boosting education. Not only infrastructurally, because infrastructure is very important, laboratories are very important, but then these subjects are also very important because the aim is to make India fully Viksit by 2047 and also Atmanirbhar. So the budget given to archaeological sites, or maybe to tourism trails, or maybe to thematic tourism trails. That's very interesting part, that around Himalaya or maybe around the areas where they have such capacities, such kind of trails on the basis of thematic area, they will be developed. So this is also part of the budget, and this has been given 38 crore rupees. So this is very interesting, and you can add it in the education sector. And then also 5 regional medical hubs will be established. So these medical hubs are also increasing the educational output, because medical is also a very important need of the society, not only of the society, but of the humanity and of the world. So India is fast emerging as a global hub of medical tourism, because we provide cheap surgeries or cheap medical facilities in an affordable cost. And besides that, the pharma sector also gets 10,000 crores. India is known as a pharmacy capital. And if you go through the pharmacy area, that is also part of education. Because the pharmacy is very important for India, because India prepares a pool of generic medicines, which are very important for the patients because they are cheap than the branded drugs. So this is also very important area where the budget aims to invest. So this is also very important. And then also there is a concept of Buddhist circuit now. Although I'm not saying that it was not present earlier, but for Buddhist circuit also the allocation has been earmarked. And these sectors aim to connect northeastern states under the scheme of Purvodaya. Purvodaya means Uday of northeastern states. So these are Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and Sikkim, and also Tripura. So Buddhist trails means there will be trained people to take the people to these trails and educate them about the importance of these trails. So this is also a very important part of education, because when you go into the education sector, you find there are certain centers, like Center of Indic Studies, Center of Hindu Studies, Center of Buddhist Studies. So this is one more aspect which is adding into the educational sector. So this is very important, and this is not done out of impulse or without any thinking. This has been done deliberately to attract the tourists who come from different parts of the world, particularly from Japan, from Korea, from other South Asian countries, because they also believe in Buddhism. And more importantly, India hosts Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama lives in India. So this Buddhism also provides India a strategic capital to compete with China. So this is very important for India to retain that capital with it. So Buddhist circuits are also going to add into the educational sector, and for that also infrastructure would be needed. And I talked about the trained guides, like 10,000 or like that. And moreover, the Institute of Hospitality Management and Tourism is being opened. So this is also one more move to produce the skilled manpower, the aim of education is to produce skilled manpower and a useful human resource. So when such kind of training centers would be opened and such kind of institutions will be opened, they'll absorb students, and those students will be skilled when they come out of those areas, and then they will go into their jobs. So it is aiming towards inclusive growth, manufacturing, and as well as one more point which was related, which was talked in the three kartavyas, that are, I think, inclusive growth was one of that objective, and then the second was manufacturing, and then sustainable infrastructure. So infrastructure has to be sustainable, because we are talking about all these infrastructures within a limit of grant. So they have to be sustainable, and they lead to Atmanirbharta. This is one of the most important component of the Indian budget, because India wants to be Atmanirbhar in all the sectors, because that Atmanirbharta will lead to a Viksit Bharat by 2047. So besides this, in the sector of energy also, the allocation has been increased from 22,919 crore to 40,000 crore. And for carbon capture also 20,000 crore has been given. So all these are not isolated, but they are the subject of study. And these studies are done in the educational institutions. So that way, I'll say that educational institutions provide material for the budget. Definitely, they provide the material for budget, and that's why these areas are located. And then Ayush is also strengthened. So Ayush is a combination of three kind of medical services like Ayurveda, Unani, and allopathic. So these three are integrated, and these will be promoted. So if they are to be promoted, then they will also produce skilled human power, and that is needed by India for inclusive growth, and as well as for every sector, like manufacturing, like anything, for modernization of army and everything. So Atmanirbharta is the goal, and for Atmanirbharta, these things are very important. And then, of course, the issues talked by Professor Swaran and Prabir are very, very, very important. But there is one more important issue, that is that MEA budget has also been given to the associated agencies like ICWA, RIS. So the budget is bifurcated by giving to these agencies also, because they also work for MEA as their bodies. So this is also very, very important. And when we see the international context, we find that India has various security challenges, particularly from Pakistan and from China. And to tackle those challenges, I think the budget of 7.85 lakh crore may not be sufficient, but it's higher than the earlier budget. So I think, keeping in view the challenges which India faces, I think this budget has been increased. And this is the highest budget of any ministry. It is more than Home Ministry, it is more than every ministry. So I think this is very important to note, that first time the highest budget has been given to the Ministry of Defense. And this has been bifurcated into different kind of units for Atmanirbharta, for Indianization, or for indigenous knowledge, or for indigenous technologies, like Professor Swaran Singh informed about the BrahMos. So similarly, other military equipments will also be developed by it. So I think this is also happening. And then you will see that there was a talk about the Global Big Cat Summit in 2026. So wherein the 95 big cat countries will be invited, and this will also include tourism. It will be guided to tourism also, because it is a thematic topic, big cat. So the thematic area parks will be helpful in this. And recently, India has also organized the second Arab Foreign Ministers, India-Arab Foreign Ministers meet. So India is also thinking big, despite the various challenges, despite the tariffs, despite the trade war, despite many unpleasant things which are happening. So I think this budget is meant for making India self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, and also Viksit by 2047 by including these various issues. So I think my time is up. So the rest of the things.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll take it in. You mentioned about the highest allocation of the defense budget in the defense sector. So this provides a wonderful pathway to move to Major General Dr. K Chakravorty ji. You've been at the frontier, sir, and I would like to know your views in the opening remarks that although we have this kind of a sharp increase in defense allocation, and more importantly, the capital expenditure has also been increased. From a military and strategic perspective, does this really reflect a shift from preparedness to deterrence, or are we still catching up on the long-standing capability gaps? Major General, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Simi, and also great to hear Professor Prabir, Dr. Swaran Singh, and Professor Annapurna Nautiyal on their views. Grateful to them. And also I'm waiting to hear Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya, whom I've heard before. And all that I would say is that firstly, I'll not get into any statistics because the opening remarks already covers them. I'll just say one small thing. The budget looks big, 7.85 lakh crores. While the seminar was on, I was converting it into dollars, that is current rate. Today, the dollar is rupees 90.91 at the present moment. I mean, say, this is the official rate. If you go and ask for it, we obviously have to pay 92 to 93. That works out to $95 billion. And I was comparing the defense budget. The USA is going to have $1 trillion plus. That's what President Donald Trump said for defense. And their defenses includes the entire global. And I would put it, you can imagine what defense, I'll say, issues involved. Just we'll leave it at that. We won't get into too many statistics. Well, undoubtedly, we have, as Professor Swaran Singh says, we are about 2% of the GDP, which is a welcome step. I look at it in a purely Indian point of view and say that our threats are well known to all of you. Not only our threats are well known to all of you, see, I'll just say we have now started adopting what is known as the dynamic response strategy, which the Prime Minister used on 2-3 occasions. One was Balakot, then we came to what you call the Pahalgam issue, where Op Sindoor has been launched. And even as we sit right now, we are on Op Sindoor 2.0. Now, this means a very big thing. It means that without mobilization, you should be able to undertake operations which involve the latest technologies and in the era of non-contact warfare. Undoubtedly, educational institutions are going to play the most important role, because if we are going to fight on say, issues like artificial intelligence, quantum, and other things to come in, goes without saying that where are we? Now let's take our adversaries and see the budget. We've got Pakistan. Op Sindoor proved to us that Pakistan is very well equipped with both Chinese and American. Both are the leaders, and we were also used. Apart from all the indigenous equipment which you all mentioned, we had to use equipment from France, equipment from Israel, equipment from Russia, equipment from the United States. And lastly, I would like to say, it's nice to speak of indigenization. I have worked for BrahMos. I've been instrumental in getting BrahMos, which is a naval project, into the army, and then seeing that it goes to the Air Force. Let me put it to you, technology, it's nice to get technology, but to absorb it and to put it to use is extremely difficult. Now, coming back to the budget. Well, the capital, as rightly brought out, I think the revenue budget is something which we need for our maintenance. But the capital budget, which has been nicely divided, is quite high in comparison to the previous years, should help us in possibly improving our capabilities. Now, let's talk what is our capability we are looking at. And let's make it a bit more simple. Firstly, we look at the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability. Most of the time, we went for a conflict without knowing what is on the other side. But today, you go to a conflict where you know what is happening because your intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability is good. So if you want that ISR capability to improve, it has to be with space. Let's just take how many satellites does the Indian Army have. Today, Indian Army does not have a single satellite. We are sharing with the Air Force one satellite. Now look at our capabilities. The Navy has one satellite which needs to be possibly now have launched another one. And all these are for communications. As far as the surveillance is concerned, the reset is concerned, you must realize we have to rely on a few satellites which the ISRO has launched, very few. China has got God knows how many satellites. There's no revisit time today. See, I am not talking about Pakistan as such, because Pakistan used entirely, as I said, Chinese, American, and other equipment, even some Russian equipment. So when you look at the first is your ISR capability, what is going to happen? What is happening? Do you have the picture of, okay, that this is going to happen? This is happening now over there. Really speaking, it's much better than what it was, but it needs improvement. So first is apart from the weapons. Second is our capability of what you call using non-contact warfare to a high degree. Undoubtedly, we have started manufacturing drones, but what is our counter-drone capability? Needs a lot of improvement. Again, I come back to both Professor Swaran Singh and Annapurna. Unless we have educational institutions leading us, let's say IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, unless they help us, and startups, we all spoke about IDEX and all, unless they come out, counter drones has become extremely important. The second thing which I would like to say is our capability for dealing with situations which would happen even internally. Though MHA is responsible and we have the CRPF as the main, what you call, say, police force, but often we have seen where it comes, where push comes to shove, the armed forces are involved, whether it's in Jammu and Kashmir, whether it's in the Northeast, it's ultimately the last, or even if you take the, say, things like you got what you call these HADR, that human assistant for this thing, for undertaking operations during adverse calamities. Ultimately, despite all these organizations being there, ultimately the Indian Army, the Indian Navy, and the Indian Air Force get in. So these are organizations which needs to be kept. Also, I would like to bring out that don't forget, we still haven't taken a decision on the Agniveers. If today the Agniveers leave us and go, that means we will be left with just about 75% of the Agniveers going out and 25% are just left. So manpower, which is extremely important in a counterinsurgency situation, in a situation at the line of control, line of actual control, becomes a very important subject. It is believed that what you call the Agniveers would be retained at a higher percentage than has been announced. I'd also like to bring into the fact that as far as Nepal is concerned, we are now not receiving any recruitment. So if we are not receiving any recruitment, now these regiments are now going to lose the Gorkha element of it. And we are today having manpower coming in from mainly Garhwal, Kumaon and other places. So this is affecting the budget because though as pensions form a part of our budget, and we are not prepared to give pensions to the Nepalese people and to treat them as Agniveers, there is no recruitment from Nepal now taking place. And there is no decision as yet from the government or from anybody. So we have to have manpower from other regions. Now, what impact it has? Well, it's beyond the scope of this discussion, but I would like to bring it up. Now come on to the point that what, other than BrahMos, what are we making? Now, the point which we must note is that the latest, what you call AMCA project, is being made indigenously. It's a great thing. I mean, say, imagine, I'm almost about so many aircrafts and a fifth generation aircraft. Again, we haven't decided to go in either for the F-35 or the Su-57. We said we'll make it indigenously. And the government is examining basically three partners. And this is what today's newspaper speaks of. It speaks of the L&T in combination with some Tatas going solely on their own capability. And lastly, Bharat Forge again with a combination of some public sector undertakings. HAL is not going to manufacture the fifth generation. So, point is, what can we do? Now, you must understand that despite all efforts, India does not even make a single engine right now. This is our capability, which we must agree. I often ask Mahindras, why don't you all make an engine? He says, when you make an engine, it means this much time is spent in making it. And then it has to succeed. So you need 10 or 15. So which are the countries which are making engines? I'll just tell you in the world. United States, Germany, UK, Italy to some extent, France, Russia, and now China has started making engines. So all engines that you have in your cars today are coming from abroad. There was a Tata Safari Dyna engine which was made, but I think even Tatas have realized it's uneconomical to make. So what we can go in for indigenousness is not that the entire aircraft and though the wish is there that everything should be made by us, it's a point like today I heard the number one man of a very famous company in the United States, NVIDIA. He says that everybody says if artificial intelligence comes in, then all the jobs will go. He says there's going to be an increased requirement for two people, or three, let's say. One, people who are dealing with education. Second, the plumber, because you need a lot of plumbers. And third is the electrician. Even today, if you go to the United States, the plumber and the electricians are required everywhere. So all that I would say is that, and educational, I would totally agree with everybody. Unless we have hackers, unless we have people who can deal with AI, we cannot spend time in the Indian Army in dealing with it. So a lot of focus has to be given in this. The budget gives some amount of money here and there, but definitely a much more great. Last point which I want to bring in this small thing, rather than go into figures. Are we going to increase the speed with which we process or procurement is an important question. The budget can allot the money, but after that, its allotment has been made. The point is, how do we process it? We have a big processing issue. Now you may go into fast track. Even fast track requires a lot of auditing. Possibly the best example which Abdul Kalam found was, if we can make a company like BrahMos, which is Indian and Russian, which is a government organization but is not a public sector unit. It's under the private sector. So you don't have the CAG audit coming in. Now I made it as simple as I could possibly. BrahMos is a part of Indian DRDO and the Russian DRD. Under the government of India, I repeat, under the government of India. It is not a public sector unit, so the audit does not come under the Comptroller and Auditor General. Therefore, it's able to deliver to you what it has delivered. Now, the point is, if we are going to spend so much time in processing, because each file, despite moving electronically, takes time to get an approval. We may have moved electronically, but to reply an email, if I take 15 days, or I don't see my email in real time, but see it in time, which can include 48 to 72 hours, in today's warfare, there's delay. On a discussion we had on Ops Sindoor, I was very lucky to hear some of the AI people. I just finished. I just finished it here.
Yeah.
He said that each time we found the drones coming in, they came with a newer form of technology from our adversary. So we had to counter it again with a different technology. So that is the speed which is needed with this. I conclude over here, ma'am. Otherwise, I can keep on talking. And it's a good budget for Indian circumstances as we look at it today. But I think we have got to possibly look at ISR and other issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Major General K Chakravorty ji. I now move to Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya ji. Madam, apart from your opening remarks, if you could also throw some light on what does this budget tell us about India's foreign policy priorities and the threat perception in the changing global order. Madam, over to you. Kindly unmute.
Thank you so much, Simi. I have a little security person, a black cat commando on my lap, so it might basically be difficult really to talk. He's been going all over my laptop. So anyway, I'm holding him now. Okay, I'm glad that you're putting in both defense and foreign policy together, because, in fact, I think the two should go together. What I'd like to, in fact, point out right in the beginning, the interconnectedness between a country's foreign policy, of its security, that is basically Suraksha. 1 second, please. I won't do this. He's really getting all over me. Okay, so the interconnectedness between foreign policy and Suraksha, that is security, this is a priority of foreign policy, and basically it's economic capacity, which in fact, Swaran Singh, Anupama, and Major General Chakravorty, they all talked about the other parts to it, okay? Economic capacity and also the human capital, which is in fact the bedrock of its productive capacity, capability, its defense capability, and also basically the business acumen which is behind it, and innovative possibilities. So human capital is very important. I'm not just talking about the defense human capital or foreign policy human capital. I'm talking about human capital in the country as such, okay, which is education, social, everything that was brought in over here. Now, this makes the union budget not just an annual arithmetic ritual, but a strategic signal communicating national intent, directions, and basically priorities. Today, in fact, we are discussing only the defense and the foreign policy, the MEA budget, and in fact, I'm going to stick to that and not go into the other things. Okay, and I'm not really going to go into the figures which have already been given again and again, except of course that the 7.84 lakh crores for the defense, well, it amounts to just 2%, and the last year's budget was 1.9. So there's only a marginal increase if you really look at that, you know. Although the figures are big, but it's only about 2% of the GDP. Defense spending, on the other hand, constitutes about 14.6% of the union government's total expenditure, which is the highest for all ministries. Now, the allotment for the Ministry of External Affairs, which has been pointed out again, is not really that much. I mean, nothing compared to the defense budget. It's only 22.1 crores, including revenue and capital expenditure. So basically, what one finds is there's a steady upgradation. Uh, Basically, it's an upward trajectory in the defense budget, which was 2.95 lakh crores in 2015-2016, and has grown to 7.85 lakh crores in 2026. Okay. Now, the same kind of trajectory cannot be seen in the MEA budget. Uh, Basically, if you look at only last year's and this year's budget, what you find is last year the revised budget was 21.7 crores for the MEA, and this year, well, it's 22.1. Now, basically, that is hardly any change at all whatsoever. Okay. Now, since we're talking first about the defense budget, let me say that the figures, at first glance, uh, without analysis, which I'm going to do right now, in fact, there's a lot of basically, well, people talk about it as, well, a huge budget, etc. But Major General Chakravorty pointed out that compared to other budgets, all right, it is actually quite, it does not really compare, okay? But what I want to say, which the others have also been talking about, of course, is basically the government's credo of Viksit Bharat and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Well, it kind of reflects the government's credo of these two. Now, what must be pointed out is that Indian armed forces are huge. We are the fourth largest armed forces globally. Okay, and active military uh, basically is numbers about 1.4 million uh, in the services. This makes us second in the world, signifying huge manpower. It is not surprising, therefore, that the defense budget, most of it has gone into basically revenue expenditure. All right, uh, and the share of the capital expenditure, which basically includes pensions, is 68.41, all right, of the budget. Now, this, of course, coincides with the huge manpower which is there. So basically, they have to be looked after the human capital there. So that, of course, is very much there. But and that which is earmarked for capital expenditure is only 2.19 lakh crores. Okay. Uh, Now, there's a big difference there. But then, of course, this is necessary. Let me just go into the nitty-gritties of this. Now, of the 2.19 lakh crores for capital expenditure, 1.85 lakh crores have been set aside for capital acquisition, uh, which is nearly 24% higher than the previous year. Now, the Ministry of Defense has already, in fact, concluded contracts worth about 2.1 lakh crores during the current year, with acceptance of necessity approvals exceeding over 3.5 lakh crores. Now, a major thrust, of course, is indigenization, which in fact others have also spoken about. Rupees 1.39 lakh crores, or 75% of the capital expenditure budget, is earmarked for basically procurement from domestic sources. Now, this probably is the result of basically defense manufacturing touching record levels in the past 2 years. And in fact, we have also exports. Major General Chakravorty was talking about the BrahMos. Now, what is interesting is that we do export the BrahMos also already. We say it's indigenously made, but it's, well, there is the Soviet part of it. BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles. We also export Akash, surface-to-air missiles and systems, and also the Pinaka. All right, Priyanka is the multi-barrel rocket launchers. And interestingly, one of the countries that we export to is France, Armenia. And basically, so, well, there has been this, but are we really indigenously producing the entire thing? Major General Chakraborty has pointed out, no, that we are not really going into making the engines and all that. Now, regarding whether all this is in response to the immediate threats or whether there is a long-term recalibration in process, This is a moot question that you asked me. The issue is that while the defense capital outlay of 2.19 lakh crores is a recognition of challenges and the need for modernization, but when the amount is examined through a capability lens, does it align with the character of future warfare? I mean, that is really the question, and I'm going to try and answer that. Now, today, India faces challenges along not only its land borders, but also basically the maritime waters. And there are, these are made much more complex by, in fact, the rapid changes in modern technologies, which in fact make technologies obsolete within a few years' time. So we have to keep on rapidly changing. New challenges include cyber vulnerability, space dependence, information warfare. All this, in fact, are things which Major General Chakravorty uh, spoke about. And in this scenario, capability gaps are no longer just theoretical. They translate into operational risk and, in fact, strategic vulnerability. Uh, in fact, the revenue expenditure of 70.5%, 56%, uh, including civil organizations, is necessary. But in fact, what it does, it is restricts fiscal space for future capability creation. Uh, Even after the increase in the capital component, uh, basically what you find is that if we are looking through the lens of the changes in the pace of technology developments in military agencies, well, is this enough? It must be remembered that modernization today is not, we talk about platforms, but it's no longer platform centric. Uh, and the present budget, in fact, still thinks about platform centric. It is becoming, if you look at other countries like the United States, it's architecture system centric, focusing on network resilience, sensor fusion, secure communications, cyber defense, space situational awareness, and autonomous decision support systems. These capabilities basically demand sustained investment and close integration between operators, scientists, and also industry. Now, while capital allocations have increased 22% and the modernization budget is at 1.85 lakh crores, committed liabilities continue to absorb a significant portion, reducing the capacity to induct emerging technologies at an appropriate scale. And now, that is also very important. I mean, just producing few is not there. The budget focuses on self-reliance, that is Atmanirbharta, and that is what we talk about. And this is central to long-term operational resilience, supply chain security, because these are getting disrupted in the present scenario, wartime sustainability, and strategic autonomy. Uh, while progress has been significant in the past decade, the ability to innovate and basically invest in advanced manufacturing is still limited. Current allocations are still insufficient to generate indigenous intellectual property in propulsion, sensors, electronic warfare, artificial intelligence, uh, basically quantum technologies, which are really emerging, and there are many other emerging domains. Uh, India mainly imports and assembles. Now, this was clear from Major General Chakravorty, what he was saying, and basically it assembles. But future military credibility will belong to countries who control core technologies. And it needs to be mentioned that while the finance minister basically proposed exemptions of customs duties on certain components, parts for aircraft, the value of the rupee has gone down in the past year. And in fact, well, basically it would mean that the net value, all right, of the goods, all right, may be even lesser in the future. All right. So this increment that we see, all right, as such in the budget, it may not really ultimately, if the money value keeps going down, the value of the rupee keeps going down, it well, work it out for yourself. Okay. Now, further, although we uh, possess, in fact, a huge armed forces, and which is our pride, it is our greatest strength. It must be also remembered that technological advancement needs constant skill upgradation to absorb new technologies. And for this, budgetary provision should be made for constant training and retraining, all right, of the armed personnel. Now, keeping in mind, in fact, I was just reading a book on First World War and the Second World War, and the Prince is sending their troops on horses, and they becoming cannon fodder because they had no idea about tanks and things like that. So basically, it's very important to already research upgrade technology. I mean, upgradation of the armed forces is very much necessary. They should absorb the new technologies, keeping in mind that the budget is like an annual arithmetic. Perhaps we should think of a formally articulated national security strategy and also an institutionalized defense review mechanism. I'm sure there are some of these, but what we need is a published national strategy. And this could help, this would enable, in fact, joint planning with other stakeholder ministries. It could also guide procurement priorities and, in fact, strengthen civil military uh, alignment, including dual use products. All right. Emerging strategies and military thought and theories point to a transition from import substitution to strategic resilience, to ultimately strategic indispensability. And increasingly, defense preparedness is limited to industrial capacity and technological sovereignty for long-term defense credibility. Since no annual defense budget can basically meet all operational aspirations, uh, and this needs this needs what prioritization. Uh, so basically, it needs planning, uh, and the base of planning is a national
Please.
strategy. Yeah. Would you like me to speak about the MEA later?
Yes, in the final round, because we are a little time constrained.
Okay, let me just kind of, wind this up, all right? So basically what we need is, as I said, a national strategy which prioritizes, and this needs planning, and the base of planning is a national strategy. The 2026 defense budget reflects continuity, but it should also send out a message of deterrence and credibility to adversaries and competitors. Otherwise, in fact, continuity, all right, which also well reflects the fact that the defense budget is only 2% of the GDP, which is only a marginal increase over 1.9% over the previous year, can be seen as a mark of complacency. Okay, let me end here. I'll talk about the MEA, the question that you raised in the next round. Okay, thank you
Yes,
so
yes,
much.
yes. Thank you very much, ma'am. You have covered it in detail. So, well, we are very much towards the closure of the time that has been allotted to us. But in this could be the last round as well. I would like to pose this general question to all the panelists about your thoughts on the way forward, but a specific question with respect to each panelist that I'd be posing. So, Professor Prabir, in closing, if you could speak about your thoughts on, from the macroeconomic perspective, about does this higher defense spending enhance India's global credibility, or does it really pose any future fiscal risks, especially with partners and investors? If you could throw some light on this, sir.
Well, briefly, again, my personal view, because as I said, that we need to be very careful reading the numbers, and particularly when it comes to the defense and MEA. Well, if the defense expenditure, there is a pull and push factor, right? If the global order is very peaceful, I'm sure the allotment to the defense will be much lesser than what is today. The disturbed world order or a volatile world order, and particularly in the neighborhood and the recent experiences, is actually it is a pull factor that to allot more and more. Now, more allotment means that it has to be supported by a healthy tax revenue. Now, the tax part, we have a binding commitment because of fiscal Responsibility Act that we cannot keep on increasing on the budget. So I think that kind of a revenue that we are sourcing from other sources like custom duty, you cannot increase, like some other popular revenue sources, which is your hands are tied. So what I see that there will be growing direct taxes, there will be rising taxes from the indirect taxes front, but in view of the GST and forthcoming election, few years from now, the indirect taxes are government won't take a chance because we had a very rationalization from 28% to 18% duties taxes just in the last year, September and October. So in short, that more budget allocation has a fiscal impact, and certainly the direct taxes will be more and more. We are in the 30% bracket. We are having an average per capita income in the dollar term, in the nominal figure is about a 4,000 US dollar. When you go for a Viksit Bharat 30 trillion economy, our per capita income is forecasted to be $15,000. Now, certainly there will be people of the nation should be ready with more taxes, presuming that we maintain a status quo of the defense expenditure, the kind of a rate that we have presently. So this is my quick observations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to move to Professor Swaran Singh. Sir, your concluding remarks, along with a specific question about your perspective, or how do you see the budget aligning with India's foreign policy posture, particularly in the Indo-Pacific and India's neighborhood? So please unmute. So please unmute. So please unmute yourself. So please.
I was saying the budget definitely reveals the national leadership's vision as to what it sees as significant sectors where it wants to put its precious resources. The budgets are always limited. It's useful to know about the American defense budget, but they are a 30 trillion economy, or the Chinese defense budget of about $280 billion compared to us $85 billion, because they're a 20 trillion economy. We are 4 trillion economy. So we have a fixed pie, and how do we wish to share it is what reveals where the leadership sees the necessity to support financially various initiatives. So in that sense, definitely national security, both external and internal, have emerged from the budget to be most significant, witnessing enormous increase. And I'm talking of the share of the national pie here of the central union budget. We have seen in last 3 years, for example, the share of defense budget going up from 14.1% to 14.3% to this year 14.7%, nearly 15%. I'm not saying that never happened in history. I mean, in 1976-77, budget for Minister of Defense was 18% of the central budget. But that was one, unique situation. What is interesting here is to see cumulatively, gradually, the share of Minister of Defense in the national pie is, inching towards increase. And in that sense, obviously, then other sectors will have to share lesser part of the pie. And that also applies to internal security. I understand the need to build infrastructure, bring modernization, ensure infrastructure is future-centric. But that means the security psyche of the sharing of the pie is much sort of forceful in terms of how national budget is distributed. And obviously in that sense, other sectors will have to wait. And when you're looking at whole of the government or a holistic approach to take India forward, then I think it has to also look at other sectors, including, as we mentioned, Ministry of External Affairs, where the bulk of the budget, virtually 1/4 of the budget of Ministry of External Affairs, goes to grant in aid. I understand that buys you certain access and influence, but that's not building the infrastructure of Ministry of External Affairs. And equally interesting, the failure of lateral entries initiative. So in that sense, how to catapult India into, Viksit Bharat would need all sectors moving forward together. And that's why I intentionally brought in Ministry of Education as well, because the future, the power of India today is its youth. And if we are not, maximizing the skill building, and we often read statistics about the employability of Indian youth, which is very poor, that is a sector that needs to really be carefully looked at. They will be our soldiers, they will be our officers, they will be our scientists, they will be our diplomats. And if the foundation of education is not receiving what successive committees on education policy has been saying since India's independence time, then I think that is one sector that I think needs a little more focus and priority. But that is for the national leadership. As I said, budget reveals the vision of national leadership, in which case internal and external security, do deserve, according to them, lion's share in the national pie. And that is what budget reflects. But to emerge as a Viksit Bharat, a global power, India will have to definitely go beyond military strength. It will have into, comprehensive national strength would include economic power, soft power, education, skill building, smart cities, both social and physical infrastructure in that sense. But I believe that will happen over a period of time, gradually, as we move from the basics of physical infrastructure to gradually looking at building the social infrastructure as well. Thank you so much. And I will have to leave because I wasn't sure if we are going beyond 1.5 hours. So apologies for my co-panelists. I enjoyed listening to each of them, and I look forward to being part of your annual event where, as Professor Nautiyal said, that may be one way we meet after some of us not being able to meet otherwise. Best of luck to the rest of the discussion, and thank you for making me part of today's discussion. Back to
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your closing comments and also for your presence. We were really delighted to have you. Thank you so much. So moving ahead to Professor Annapurna Nautiyal, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to hear your concluding thoughts on, and also if you could address a specific question from my side. As we look ahead and look forward, what institutional or doctrinal gaps you think remain unaddressed in this budget 26-27, and especially when it comes to India's long-term strategic posture?
Thank you for your question, and I would again like to draw your attention that the budget of MOD is largely focused for military procurement, for three Army, Navy, and Air Force procurement, their Indianization and their manufacturing, etc., and their upgradation. But everything depends on skill, because skill is empowerment. So we need a huge sector of skilled manpower. And especially, I would like to remind you about a statement which our Minister of Commerce made in some interview. Like that, he was comparing China and India. China takes a lead in every sector, like services, manufacturing, AI, semiconductors, computer chips, and every high-end technology. Where do we stand? So his statement was that in China, every graduate or every educated person makes computer chips, semiconductors, AI services, etc. And in India, what kind of graduates are we producing? They are degree holders, but they can get employment only in Swiggy, Zomato, etc., etc. So this is the level of skill which we are producing. So we have to have startups. And this budget also focuses on startups. Startups should be for innovation, for new technologies, for bringing up new technologies, because army or military is also developing, like it's a manless war also. So we need such kind of technologies where there are only air-to-air warfare without man, involving man. So that higher technologies are required for that. And so although on the one hand we need everything, every manpower, but we need creators, we need innovators. And about this, the budget indicates very clearly that in every sector, like for growth, for manufacturing, and also for infrastructure development, we need skilled manpower. So skill is the key to achieve the aims of this budget. And this budget is very ambitious. As I said, that it is the highest budget which has been given to the MOD. It is above the Ministry of Home Affairs also, and it's 2% of GDP approximately. So this is the highest budget, and this is the budget with highest expectations from the people of India, about which in the Constitution we say we the people of India. So for we the people of India, this budget means a lot, because India is not as much rich as it should have been by now. Like you must remember the dialogue or the statement which was posted on X by President Trump, and along with Russia, he named India also as a dead economy. And he said that both of these dead economies can go anywhere. I don't care about them. So this is the state when India is expected to grow at the rate of 7.4% GDP. So we are not doing bad, but for looking up great, we have to do great things. So this budget is full of expectations and also aspirations. So for fulfilling aspirations, we have to fulfill the expectations from us. Us means we the people of India. Like our Commerce Minister, I like his statements very much. Like he has said that the people who are born after 20,000, they must be trained and upskilled after 20,000. So because we need to create domestic manufacturing hub, not only for us, for daily products, but for defense equipments also. So there should be manufacturing hub. We have to secure the supply lines. We have to secure our equipment, and we have to have investment friendly atmosphere. So about which Chakravorty ji also talked, that there are many regulations which control the procurement. So these bottlenecks to be removed, and technology input to be added by training the youth and by giving the skilled manpower to the country. Then we will be doing the best service, because the Agnipath service was also started because of this unemployment. So unemployment can be addressed by startups, and on this budget also focuses. So thank you very much, Simi, for giving time to me. And these are my concluding thoughts.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your concluding thoughts. And it has really been a reminder that we need to invest in skill building for the huge demography dividend that we have and we need to utilize. Thank you so much. So moving ahead to Major General P.K. Chakravorty ji. So your thoughts, concluding thoughts, and a specific question from my side as to the budgetary allocations have definitely risen in the Ministry of Defense, and it has caught the headlines. So now, is this actually sufficient? Increase is actually sufficient, or do institutional reforms matter more at this stage?
Well, thank you, Dr. Simi. And I'll say that firstly, there is no doubt about it, what you said, that the budget has given us a big chunk for our defense preparedness. But unless, as you correctly brought out, unless institutionally we realize that we have to now expend this budget in a manner in which it can be achieved, I can assure you the armed forces would leave no stone unturned to do their bit of work. But the decision is at the level of government. That means I don't say that the armed forces are not a part of the government, they are. But the process continues thereafter with the bureaucracy and the, shall we say, the leadership to okay the proposals in the required time. So that institutional, shall we say, speed has to be done to make sure that we get what we are asking for. Even a fast track procedure must be really a fast track procedure. It should not be just what you call a procedure which takes a long time, subject to lot of clearances, lot of debates. And that is, I'm talking of not debates in parliament. I'm talking about a lot of debates within the, shall we say, within the ministry, then the approvals which we get from the CCS or whatever financial approvals, they should be streamlined and more speedy. The next thing which I would like to say is, see, technology is something we have to realize. We agree that startups is a good way, MSME is a good way, but we also have to realize that we have to work in a very, very innovative way to make sure that we absorb the technology which we get. Often technology is available, but we are not able to absorb it. And that is a major issue which I would like to bring out, which is whether the budget gives the money or not give the money, you may get a particular instrument, but unless you have the manpower for it, let's take a simple thing. Let's take today the most important warfare is going to be information warfare. Unless you have adequate number of hackers, who's going to produce these hackers? As I would say, Professor Nautiyal very correctly brought out that the Commerce Minister very correctly said, do we have a graduation for hackers? How many hackers does China have? They have 1 million hackers today. Do we have that numbers? Who can hack, who can get into all the sites and carry out these issues? So these are the questions of the future. There are many issues, but I would like to end over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Major General, for your concluding thoughts and spot on analysis. Thank you so much. Moving to Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya ji. Madam, you had your final thoughts to make about the MEA and the budget. If you could provide that to us, and also in conclusion, if you could talk about how the investment through the budget shape India's diplomatic leverage and soft power, especially in India's neighborhood. Back to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Simi. Thank you, Simi. In fact, I was going to talk about India's neighborhood and partly soft power. Now, what I want to say that only a portion is actually allocated to soft power. That is training, and we have been doing this for a very long time, training people, all right, as such, there's foreign students in our universities. Well, there's also cultural heritage. So we have these programs, I mean, where the dance troops go out and all that. ICCR is included in that. And in fact, cultural heritage gets about 451.19 crores that you find. And that is soft power. So that kind of explains that. Now, how important is basically soft power? In fact, we have moved from soft power to smart power. Well, if you look at Joseph Nye now, he's talking about smart power rather than soft power alone. All right, soft power is important. And in fact, there is a lot of private investment also in soft power when it really comes to things like Indian cinema and all that. So that's taken care of. But the neighborhood is very important. And here, in fact, what I would like to say is that the allocation to the MEA, in a way, foreign policy is also written into budgets. And basically, this can function as a kind of political text. And here, in fact, I want to bring in our neighborhood policy. We've been talking about neighborhood first. Now, first of all, of course, the figures are given in the beginning, but just to remind you, 22.1 crore, which is really not that much compared to, well, the other ministries. And also, you don't find any kind of large increase over the last year. Although we are increasing the number of embassies abroad, but there's still not enough, definitely. Now, neighborhood first policy is one of the key policies of this government, the present government, ever since it came to power in 2014. It's been talking about neighborhood first, all right? Now, why? it's obviously very important because having a peaceful neighborhood around, all right, and a neighborhood which is connected through roads, aid, dams, trade, etc., to India, all right, would basically make for kind of, you see, hospitable neighborhood where we don't expect. Okay, interconnectedness is very much important. Okay, but over the past 2 years, including Operation Sindhu last year, then regime outcomes in Nepal and Bangladesh, the instability, the economic instability in Sri Lanka, all this has kind of, you see, upset the entire neighborhood. And Maldives, for instance, you see, the government which came to power, it came on a slogan which said India out. All right. So basically an anti-India kind of a thing. All right. You see this in Bangladesh too. And Nepal, of course, we have been seeing it again and again. All right. Okay. So what you find is this is the first year that we find that India's allocations to development aid is security, all right, as such, in another by another name, all right, because you are giving it to connect and to attract your neighboring countries to us, all right, or other countries to us, okay. So we find a change, all right, this present year for the first time, all right. Bhutan remained the largest overall recipient with 2288 crores allocated, reflecting a increase of 17% over 2025. The allocation to Mauritius was cut by 33%, as was basically to Maldives by 17%, all right. Uh, Nepal's allocation declined by 4% to 800 crores, and Bangladesh's was halved, all right, from 120 crores to 60 crores only, all right. But grants to Sri Lanka, on the other hand, will increase 33% to 400 crores, all right. There was a moderate increase for Seychelles, African states, Eurasian states, Latin America. Significantly, the funding to the Chabahar Code, which had already received a huge amount, all right, this even last year it was 400 crores, and there was promise of more, but this was disbanded. Okay, so basically, this reflects not just strategic autonomy in our foreign policy, which I've been talking about and all that. The foreign policy analysts have been talking about that India, multipolar, strategic autonomy. What we see is stark realism coming in, all right, as such. If we look at the fine print, in fact, this will become very clear, all right. Starting with Bhutan, which has the largest allocation, which I pointed out, uh, this is a reflection of the mutual dependence formalized through dams, uh, through basically transmission links, and also trust, okay. The Tala hydropower project, all right, this was built with Indian assistance, all right, and once, in fact, it supplied nearly 40% of Bhutan's basically natural resources to the uh, India's eastern states, all right. And during monsoons, in fact, they produce to full capacity, more or less, all right, helping Bhutan and also India through, all right, uh, basically quietly cushioning India's energy needs, all right. Nepal's allocation of rupees 800 crore also follows a similar logic. Hydroelectric power and connectivity, water management projects are not abstract goodwill gestures. All right. We are giving you this. I mean, we have always been a big brother and we said we're doing this. They directly affect India's energy security, flood control, and in fact, regional trade corridors. So basically, it is in our interest, in our national interest, that we are also doing this. It's not just goodwill gesture or anything like that. Also, it is very important because if you cut, and why should we cut aid to Nepal in any case? Even if a government which is not in favor of, which is kind of pro, like the only government was pro China and all that, okay? Even if a similar kind of government comes in, we still will continue to kind of, you see, try and give development aid to connect it to India because we do not want external influence there. All right, so it is in our interest. Okay, Sri Lanka too is vital for India's sea lanes. Economic instability there causes strategic vulnerability to India. The enhanced allocation of rupees 400 crores is uh, an important responsibility for India because the island state sits astride vital shipping lanes through which, in fact, a significant share of India's trade and energy imports basically pass. Now, the cuts in aid to Bangladesh and Chabahar, on the other hand, do not mean disengagement. Okay, they signify a kind of strategic pause. All right, Bangladesh, when it came down to 60 crores from 120 crores, This is a reflection of political displeasure, all right, without, well, causing any kind of rupture in relationship. You can cut it together, but we don't want to rupture relations. We're waiting for the elections. Let's see what happens. Okay, so you're giving it. In any case, the 120 crores, they only spent over 37 crores. Okay, last time. So there's also a question of whether they want it or not. So we're keeping it there. All right. Now, Myanmar's reduction reflects a hard reality of basically prolonged instability. Where the money goes, you do not know. So basically, there's been a cut down. There's also a cut down in Maldives assistance, as I said. This is modest and it reflects basically strained bilateral relations, which we are hoping will improve after our Prime Minister's visit there. Okay. The political rhetoric there has not been very favorable to India in the past years, and therefore, but it is improving. Now, taken together, these decisions suggest a more conditional approach. That is, assistance is not automatic. Okay, it is linked to political trust, absorptive capacity, and strategic outcomes. And that partnership comes with expectations. So this is realism, all right, as such. So in a way, so are we changing, all right, that way. So now the Chawar case, and this is very important. This is different. Uh, it kind of reflects a kind of geopolitical constraint. All right, India has invested over 370 million, and I'm talking dollars. All right, $370 million in developing the Shahid Behusti terminal at this port, which is operated by India Ports Global Limited under a 10-year all right contract. Uh, Basically, and this gives direct access to Afghanistan, Central Asia, and potentially Russia, bypassing Pakistan, all right, which is very important for us. So strategically, geopolitically, geoeconomically, it's very important, all right. Uh, but the reason for the zero allocation this year has been the fact that the US Treasury granted India a 6-month conditional sanctions waiver to continue operating the Chabahar terminal. This expires on 26th April 2026. All right. Now, basically, I've been trying to work out things. All right. Now, other countries were facing sanctions, but we did get a waiver, sanctions waiver. Well, on the other hand, our tariffs increased to 50%, and there was a punishment tariff also. Now, what you find is right after this budget comes out, we have this, well, father of all deals. If we take the UAE trade deal as mother of all deals, all right. So basically, the India-US trade deal. This is just after the budget, and we are not funding. I do not know if there's any connection, but obviously there is. As I said, you can read the fine print and you can kind of predict foreign policy, or rather see the way foreign policy is going to a certain extent. Can we, or do we, for that matter? I mean, read anything into this? Okay. Uh, so basically, India has opted for political constraint, all right, in this case. Okay. Uh, so basically, I personally feel that it marks a kind of quiet retreat from India's long articulated ambition to shape Eurasian connectivity on its own terms. And basically, it illustrates the limits of India's so called strategic autonomy policy, all right, uh, in the present global scenario. Okay. Whether it signifies a tactical pause or the beginning of a more cautious, inward leaning phase in India's foreign policy will depend less on the budget and more on global and neighborhood policies, that is, in Washington, D.C., in Tehran, in Dhaka, in Beijing. All right. And in conclusion, I must say the risk is that the sudden reduction can open space for external actors to increase influence in the region. So we must be careful about what we do. Okay. Thank you, Simi.
Excellent. Thank you so much, ma'am. You have really covered the entire crux of the program and also weaved in the thoughts of all other panelists in conclusion. So it has been a wonderful learning for me and also for all others, I'm sure, who would tune in even later. Thank you so much. So I'll just sum up in a sentence that today's discussion, according to me, it actually shows that budget 26-27 is not just about higher defense spending, but it is also about aligning the military capability, the economic strength, the diplomacy and knowledge institute, as well as India's demography into a coherent strategic vision. And the real test essentially will then lie in the execution, coordination, and the institutional reforms. So thank you so much. It has been really, really insightful. I'd like to now hand it over to Priyanka to close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Paridhi, can you please take over for the vote of thanks?
Yeah. So, as we conclude this panel discussion on defense, foreign policy, and union budget 2026-27, I, Paridhi Jain, on behalf of IMPRI, Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies, New Delhi, extend my heartfelt gratitude. Our deepest thanks to our chair and experts for today. Thank you to all our esteemed panelists for their insightful and thought provoking addresses. Your expertise and perspectives have greatly enriched today's discussion and provided us with valuable takeaways on this critical topic. We deeply appreciate your time and contributions. We also thank all the participants who joined us live. And for those watching later on our YouTube channel, listening to the podcast, or reading our publication, we deeply value your engagement and interest. We look forward to your participation in tomorrow's budget discussion on gender, social inclusion, and union budget 2026-27. We hope you will continue to join us for future IMPRI web policy talk and web policy learning programs. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Simi. Thank you very much for getting us together. And I would also like to compliment Sanjukta ji for taking space. She took her space very rightfully, and I think she was given that time also to speak on that topic, because the topic was complex. Anyways, it was nice meeting all other panelists, and to special thanks to Simi and Dr. Arjun, and also Paridhi and all others who have joined us. So thank you very much, and see you again very soon. Thank you. Thanks a lot, and all the best. All the best.
Thank you, Simi, Paridhi, and Annapurna. It's really nice meeting you again. I think after 1 year.
After 1 year.
Thanks.
I said it before you joined.
Yeah, Professor Chakravorty, listening to him.
Thank you very much.
She is the moderator. She is the medium to
Thank you.
Absolutely,
We'll convene
getting
very
us
soon.
together.